When I was a teenager, I always used to hear people say, your 20s are so confusing, your 20s are so chaotic, etc. But then you would also hear adults say, oh, I wish I was 20 again. Or on birthdays, let's say they're turning 45, they'll make a joke and be like, yep, I'm turning 22, you know what I mean? And there's just always been this weird energy around the decade of the 20s. And when I turned 20, I was very optimistic about it. Very optimistic. I was like, you know what? I'm different. I'm different. I've made different decisions. I have no interest in my 20s being turbulent and chaotic and crazy. I'm just going to keep my head on straight and let the rest work itself out. And I am here to tell you today that I am not different, actually. And I'm only a year and a half into my 20s. I'm 21. I'll be 22 in a few months. And I have quickly realized that I am no different. And I am not immune to the chaotic, turbulent struggles and just weird, like, tornado of things and decisions and opportunities and lack of opportunities that you just end up stepping into, seemingly, when you turn 20. So today, I am going to just talk to you about everything 20s, early 20s, the struggles that I'm facing right now, the pressures that I'm feeling right now, and hopefully you can relate and take something from this, and at the very least, feel less alone in the things that you're feeling and the way that you are feeling in your 20s, or even if you're not in your 20s, if you're older than that, I think that this can still be helpful to, maybe you've never connected with someone who's validated what you felt when you were 20. And I'm here to do that today. So, taking us back a few years, I always say that I've had a very different and untraditional college experience, and just the whole, like, from age 16 to 20, for me, didn't look like it does on TV or in the movies or whatever. So when I was 16 years old, it was 2020, and finished out my junior year of high school. That's when everyone went home because of COVID and everything that we know happened in 2020. That summer, I got approached by a local community college who partnered with my high school to do this program called the Running Start program. And essentially what it was you take college classes your senior year, and they count as not only your first year of college, but also your senior year. So the credits are fulfilled. And there were certain criteria that you had to meet to be eligible to do this. For example, if I had left a ton of core classes in high school for my senior year, then I wouldn't have necessarily been able to do this. But the only core class that I had left was English 4, and I could just take English at the college level, and that counted towards my associate's degree, and it knocked out my requirement for graduating high school. And at this time, this was sort of a no-brainer for me. Everything in the world was up in the air. Nobody knew if we were actually going to be in person for our senior year or if we were going to be online. The class that had just graduated before us basically did it virtually or like a drive-through, grabbing their diplomas, and that just wasn't an appealing senior year in my mind. It just didn't seem worth it, and I figured might as well, if I'm going to be sitting at home on a computer, might as well be doing college classes than doing jumping jacks in front of the Zoom camera for a gym class that I don't even need to take. So I made the decision and I did this. I spent my entire senior year in college classes. They were all online. And this, up until this point in my life, is probably the single most pivotal time period in my life. Like, there have been many ups and downs and changes and whatnot, but this was a clear marking point of I was the Dana prior to this, and then I became the Dana after this, and it was just a huge shift in my life for the better. I kind of just took off with my college classes, and I really don't know what happened to me, but I just laser focused, and I just said to myself, this is what I'm doing now. Like, this is what I'm focusing on. I didn't have the external stress and drama of just being in high school. I could just focus on my classes. I think maybe now that I'm talking about it and thinking about it, maybe subconsciously it was my way of trying to have some sort of grip and control since the whole world was like chaos. Like, we could hardly even leave the house. You couldn't even like see your friend because their parents would, not allow it because COVID, blah, blah, blah. And you couldn't go to the store, and it was just like crazy. So maybe this was my way of grounding myself and trying to latch on to some sense of control. And so I just remember, especially that first semester, staying up really late until 1, 2 in the morning, figuring things out, just doing things that I had never done before. Like, I was not some crazy straight A student in high school by any means. And then I just like turned into that through this experience. And this essentially made me grow up faster than I think I would have if I had done, the traditional senior year and then gone off and lived at college and maybe partied a little and lived in a dorm and lived off alone and worked a part-time job at Starbucks. And you know what I mean? Like, for me, it was very different. That's not what I experienced. I went right, and I have a late birthday and I didn't miss any years of school or anything. So yes, I was 16 when senior year began, when I began college. And thinking back, that's really young. Like, really, really, really young. I went full time, and by the time I was 18, I had my first degree, my associate's degree in computer science. It was also throughout this time that I started working my first jobs. My very first job was at an outdoor food stand, and I think I worked at a grocery store after that. But then getting into more like quote unquote professional-ish jobs, I started getting into my first semester in college at the community college. I remember randomly checking my email one day, and there was a notification that they were hiring in the library. And that sounded appealing. I was like, why not? I would like a little extra cash. I would like to buy more clothes. Sounds good. Applied for it, ended up getting the job. And it was a really cool experience because it was in person. Even though every college class was remote and online, there were no students in the college, this job was in person. So I worked for the library at the community college, and I would like back books and put the plastic like tape around the cover of books and check books in and out. And some people did come in frequently, to study, but I think it was timed and everything had to be sanitized. Like, it was a whole thing because it was COVID era. But working at the college quickly became more and more professional. And at this time, I'm now 17, and I grew from just working in the library to then working in the business office. And in the business office, I had my own cubicle, and it was like a big like corner cubicle, and I could decorate it. And I had a great boss who I still talk to this day. And I started making connections and meeting people and realizing what a job like this could feel like compared to, working for like an outdoor food stand or a grocery store. And it was just so amazing. And I was learning so much about business and the different operations within the college. And, I was friends with the business manager of the entire college. And it was just really cool. And then things started branching out a little bit more. And then I started working for the marketing department. So how this would happen was I would split hours, like maybe one day I'd be in the library and then the next the business office and then the next in the marketing department. And I was getting a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. And in the marketing department, I had my own office, like my entire own office. I think I was still 17 at this point. I'm talking like a door to close, my own desk. I could decorate it how I pleased. And that job was even cooler because the other girl who was in the marketing department at that time that I joined, the director of marketing, was leaving and they hadn't filled her position. And so my boss became the other girl who worked in marketing full time. So I was like a student worker, and this other girl was like a real, like she worked for the marketing department full time. And so she became my boss, but she was really, really nice, really down to earth, chill. She would teach me things about marketing and have me, do the work, but we would talk all day during our job, and she ended up turning into a great friend, and now we hang out all the time. So that was super cool. Through this, I also started picking up other opportunities, like it was time for the student government to go through elections, and I wanted to get more involved because, again, it was my one escape from COVID time. It was either go to work at the college and like talk to people and have some sort of socialization, or sit at home. And so I kept getting more and more involved, and I ended up getting elected as the president of the student government. And because my grades were so good, like I literally had like a 4.0 at this point. And I don't say that in like a bragging way. It even blows my mind because when I was in high school, again, I was not that student. I was not that kid. I was not focused. I was just pulled into drama and like whatever else and skipping class and skipping lunch. And that's not who I was. And I'm blown away at the person, by God's grace and my hard work, that I turned into. So because of that, I had like a 4.0. I got inducted into their honor society, and then found out that their honor society had like a whole board of people who ran it. And then I ran for president of that as well, and I ended up becoming that. So at one point in this time period, I was about 17 years old. I was about to wrap up with my associate's degree, and it wasn't even like an associate's degree in like general studies. It was an associate's degree in computer science, which involves a lot more. I had to take up to Calculus 3. I had to take all of these different like coding and all of these other classes that are, in my opinion, a lot more challenging than just taking like general classes. And I was working through 3 different departments at the college, making my own money, and I was the president of the student government and the honor society. And through the student government and honor society, I was also facilitating different programs. Like in the winter, I did a winter clothing drive where I would collect donations and put them out and clean the clothes and advertise so that people knew, and get advertisement out around the town so that people knew that you can come to the college if you need winter clothes. And I also, during the entire year, did the food drive where we would get donations from people and even from companies who had like extra cans of food or whatnot. And I would take afternoons to sort through everything. I had some people working under me who would like help me maybe put the food out or whatnot. And then I would also go around to every classroom, because at this point, some classes were starting to trickle back in and be in person. And I would have little baskets in each classroom, and I'd fill them with snacks so that students could, have snacks for free at no cost. This was a wonderful time. I tell this story and I go into somewhat of detail with it because I think it's very important to where I am now and my 20s and the struggles that I'm soon to share with you. Because although I was kind of thrusted into adulthood quite quickly, and I was working jobs and I was going to school and I was doing really well in school, and I started learning how to balance like 1,000 things at once and get really good at it, and that was exciting. I guess I had just never realized what I was actually capable of when I got my head out of my ass and actually focused my time and energy on these different things that were productive with my life. So it was a taste of the working world, the grind, the hustle, but it was coming with some new, exciting rewards. So fast forward, I turned 18, and that spring, I graduated with my associate's degree, and I had already, applied to continue for my bachelor's for another 2 years, and I was going to University of Florida online in the fall. And I decided to go online for two reasons. The first reason is that my first 2 years of college were all online anyways, so I got very used to doing that. Like, I was forced into that through COVID. I got very used to the discussion posts and doing it on my own time and being able to take my laptop anywhere and being able to work all day and then take classes in the evening because it's, whether I'm meeting with a class on Zoom at 6 p.m. or it's just get the homework done by the due date, it's a lot more flexible than like living on campus and physically attending lectures and things like that. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there's absolutely value to that, but for me, it worked a lot better in my life. And so that was the first reason. I was just used to that. But the second and bigger reason was now I was used to working, and I had actually already gotten a full-time job at a marketing company. So it was January that I got this full-time job, and I was graduating with my associates that May. So my very last semester of my associates, I started working my first full-time job, because the other jobs where I was a student worker for the community college, those were all part-time. This was my very first full-time job. I was 18 years old, still going to college full-time. This job was also in person, but an hour and 15 minutes through a city from my house. So this was another whole shift and kind of like growth spurt in my life of, getting up early and physically driving an hour and 15 minutes through a city in the car that I had just saved enough money to buy. Literally, I didn't buy a car until I was 18 because I had to save my money to be able to buy it and insure it all myself. This was another reason why I chose to go to UF online, because it then allowed me to continue working full-time and go to school online. And I specifically chose UF online because I did a lot of research on, like, all right, if I'm going to go to college online for my bachelor's, what's the best program? Like, just give me the best program. And turns out it was UF, #1 in the nation, years in a row. And I got in, and I just happened to love Florida. I love going on vacations to Florida. I love the heat. I love the palm trees. I love Disney. I love Universal Studios. Like, I love the whole thing. So it made me feel closer to my second home. This was another kind of shift, not as big of a shift as before when I went from high school to college, but this was another shift because I was graduating from community college, the place where I got my first taste of adulthood, responsibility, meeting new people. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that everyone treated me like a professional. And that was something that I had never experienced before. When you were in high school and whatnot, and you're a teenager, you're usually talked down to. Usually not like you don't know anything, or that everyone knows better than you. And listen, most of the time as teenagers, we're thick-headed and just think that we know best. However, it was a completely mind-altering experience to be walking through a college at 16, 17, 18 years old and having the dean of the college chit-chatting with me or wanting to get lunch or this and that, and being really impressed by what I was doing and how much I was bringing to the table for the college. And I knew everyone, all the way down to the security guards, to the janitors. Everyone I knew and loved and had a relationship with and talked to. And that was my first taste of that. So when I graduated, of course I was excited to be graduating. Of course it was crazy and awesome to hold a degree in my hand at 18 years old. But I kind of went through a little bit of a rough patch because I worked that marketing job from, I believe it was January through that summer after graduating. And then it ended up getting kind of bad. Like, it was a small marketing company and there were just a lot of things that were off. And I believe to my best ability, like, I was a great worker and I gave a lot to that job. But things would just happen where, like, my boss would know that I was on vacation, literally out of state, and it was Father's Day, and would just be blowing up my phone, like asking where a post is, or where this is, or where that is, when I had already taken care of everything. And there were just different little things like this. And it wasn't, like a big company that had like structures and like an HR department and things like this. And it was kind of just this small company making up their own rules as they went along. And there were a lot of times that I started to like feel uncomfortable with some of the people there. And so it got to the point where I left and I did not have another job lined up at this point. But it was just one of those situations where it was like really, really bad and it kept getting worse. And at this point, I was also dealing with a medical issue that I didn't know too much of yet. It ended up being a cyst in my neck that a year later got surgically removed. But in the time being, the doctors didn't know what it was. And I had a lot of testing that had to be done. Like, they thought I had lymphoma because, where my lymph node was very, very swollen. And yeah, so this was also happening and the job was just they were not being understanding. So it was around, I want to say August, that I left that job. And then come September, I needed a new job. And at this point, I wanted to try out the restaurant vibe. Now, if you remember, yes, my first job was at an outdoor food place, like summer outdoor food. But it's not the same as like restaurant, waitressing, that sort of deal. So I applied to a few places. I ended up working at a restaurant from, I want to say September through December. Like a few different restaurants. There was one that I was at most of the time, and then I ended up going off to a nicer restaurant at the very end. But from September through January, this was also my first semester at University of Florida, getting my bachelor's degree. I worked at a restaurant. And at first I was very exciting for this because this was my sort of way of like finding myself. Like, oh, well, I just worked professional jobs for the past year and a half, 2 years. I'm going to be a teenager for once. I'm going to work at a restaurant and I'm going to be a waitress and I'm going to make hella tips and I am just going to absolutely blow people away with the cash that's just going to be like falling out of my fanny pack. And like, that's the vibe now. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I could not have been more wrong. Listen, you guys, in a world that spends most of their time on screens, I am all for a healthy escape. Whether that's just stepping away from the screens or getting lost in a good book for a while. We need that break. And if you're looking for that kind of escape, you have got to check out sarahcrownbooks.com. Some people are born storytellers, and let me tell you, Sarah Crown is one of them. From recording her first stories as a child to studying under top Hollywood story experts like John Truby, she has built a life around words, weaving thrilling narratives with depth and heart. With degrees in psychology, education, and law, Sarah brings a unique perspective to her writing, one that grips readers and just doesn't let go. Trust me, her stories are the perfect way to unplug and dive into something unforgettable. Her latest novel, All These Threads of Time, is the perfect blend of heart-pounding suspense and mind-bending time travel. Set in the 80s, when Sylvie Mitchell discovers that she can jump through time, she's determined to save her family from a serial killer. But the past fights back in ways that she would have never expected. If you love mysteries with a twist and time travel that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, this book is for you. And if you're looking for more than just stories, Sarah's Substack called A Busy Lady is your backstage pass to her writing journey. She takes you behind the scenes with inspiration, writing tips, and more. Whether you're a writer, a reader, or just someone looking to live a more creative life, A Busy Lady will give you the tools and motivation you need. Don't miss out on Sarah's thrilling books and creative wisdom. Check out sarahcrownbooks.com for more information on her books and Substack. That's SARAHCROWNEBOOKS.com. In stories, we find ourselves. I hated working in a restaurant. Did it have its pros? Sure. Like, I wasn't working 9 to 5, but I was working every weekend. And yeah, I'd be like off on a Tuesday or a Wednesday when other people would typically be at work, but it just was not for me. And it is for some people. Some people love working in a restaurant. You know, everyone has their different thing, and it just was not for me. And I remember sitting there on like Friday and Saturday nights and seeing all these people come in and like couples and girlfriends and this and that. And they would all be celebrating like the end of the week, like it's the weekend, like blah, blah, blah. And like there I was working and cleaning up the food off their table and this and that. And something about that stirred something inside me where I was like, my next goal is to be that person. Like I want to go to a restaurant on a Friday night and relax. You know what I mean? So this whole time I was applying to jobs, and now I was applying to jobs that I was qualified for, you know, having my associates in computer science, because ultimately that was the goal of getting my first degree in computer science, was that I wanted to start working in the field as quickly as possible. I just ended up at restaurants because I had to make money in the meantime. I still had bills to pay. And it was actually, this is kind of a funny side story, but at this time I'm definitely going to go into this in another episode, but basically, long story short, I got very trapped in my own head and very consumed and very buried in the stress of it all. And just remember, like, this is all relative. This was stressful to me then. I'm a different person now, but those were my circumstances. So that's, you know, even me saying it sounds a little silly now. However, I remember how I felt back then, and it's all relative to people's unique experiences. So I remember it was my first semester at UF for my bachelor's degree. It was all new things. You know, your bachelor's is naturally harder than your associate's degree. The further you get into school, the harder it gets. And I was getting used to new platforms because UF had their whole new platform. I was doing all of these things, and I was working at the restaurant, and I was just kind of feeling like depressed because I really didn't like my job, and I really didn't feel like I was utilizing the degree that I had at that point. I felt very buried and down in underneath like a black cloud. And I would apply to like a couple jobs here and there, but that whole process would be very stressful because it would take so much time. Because when I had a sliver of time and it's like, okay, either do the homework that's due tonight or apply to a job, I would pick doing the homework because that seemed more urgent and relevant at that moment. And my mom very, very graciously helped me in this time where, you know, I wrote my cover letter and my resume. I had already had those things like written prior. And she said, send me your cover letter and resume, and while you're at work, I will apply you to some jobs, because I would usually work nights, and, you know, my mom would have time at night to just scope around and apply me to a few jobs. And I cannot thank my mom enough for helping me in this moment, because, you know, I felt lazy back then for like why couldn't I apply to 3 jobs a day myself? Like, why couldn't I be doing that? But I was really like overwhelmed. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It was like depression or something. And my mom swooped in and really helped my life snowball again in a more positive direction. And I remember I was sitting at the restaurant that I was working at. I was hosting that night. I was sitting at a table, like folding the silverware into the napkin. And I kept getting text messages from her, like, I just applied you to this job, and I just applied you to that job, and send me the confirmation code that was sent to your email, and blah, blah, blah. And the very last job that she applied me to that night, I'll never forget the text. She said, also, I applied you to a job at the high school that you went to. And it's so funny because in that moment, I literally laughed out loud to myself, and I was like, ha, I will never work there because when I left high school, I was so ready to leave high school. I didn't really enjoy high school. That's a story, that's its own story for another day. But the thought of going back and working there at that moment, I was like, absolutely not. And I remember saying that to her. I was like, LOL, thanks, but even if they give me the job, I'm not working there. And I think she said something along the lines of, just give it a try. Like, just see. You can always turn a job down, like, just see what happens. And long story short, that ended up being the job that I got and another huge turning point in my life. The job was to be an IT technician for the school district that I went to high school in, but the job was actually for the middle school, not the high school. And I had never went to the middle school because I was an out-of-town kid at the high school. So I went to the middle school in my own town. And then when I went to high school, our town didn't have a high school, so I went where I went. This job was to be the IT technician for that middle school that I never went to. And it was like the stars aligned yet again. I was interviewed, I was hired, and I later found out that my boss, the IT director, at that time hired me because someone did that similar thing for him. Like, I remember him telling me the story that, when he was young and trying to like break into the field, and someone gave him a chance and it just changed his whole career. And he did that for me, and I was his very first hire. Like, I think this was his first time in a managerial position as director of IT, and I was the first person that he ever hired. And my gosh, did it change so many things. So many things. So I worked at the restaurant from like September to December. I was being interviewed for this new job around like December, the end of December. And then I started that January, like the second week of January. This was so amazing for me because even though I had my associates in computer science, I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome and feeling like, oh, well, like I have this degree, but do I really know what I'm doing? Like, I've never done it for real. I've never done it in a job. And the thing that's really challenging about being young in your career and like breaking into a career is that almost every job requires at minimum 3 years of experience for like an entry-level job. And it's like, well, how is that entry level? Obviously, I don't have 3 years of experience. I just graduated college. Like, what? Like, give me a chance here. And, I, by the grace of God, again, was given a chance. And so through working this job, I learned so much. Like, I learned more than I learned in my degree. I learned real world things. I was like really doing the thing. Like, I was the IT technician for the school. I was supporting the teachers and the students and the principals, and I had my own office, and I was making friends, and I was a part of the IT team, and I just became a part of this world that I could have never even imagined existed 5 minutes from my house. Like, literally, the middle school that I worked at was 5 minutes from my house. And another crazy side note just on like God's timing and how everything happens for a reason. I was still dealing with the cyst in my neck and like the medical struggles, and like it looked like a ball coming out of my neck at this point. Like, I was ill. And in one of my very first meetings when I had gotten the job and I was sitting down with the director of IT, I told him about it. I was like, I know I'm very new here, but I just want to let you know that I'm seeing a few doctors and they're thinking that they may have to operate on me. And so I may be out for a couple of weeks soon. And I know this is like terrible timing, but I wanted to let you know ahead of time. And we got into conversation about it, and come to find out his wife had something similar, and she went to this like amazing doctor, and he helped her, and he was really knowledgeable and the whole 9 yards. And this was so helpful at that time because the doctor that I was seeing, I didn't really like. I didn't feel like he was listening to my concerns enough. I didn't feel comfortable going into the operating room with him. So I ended up booking an appointment with this doctor that my boss had suggested, and he was everything that my boss said he was. He was amazing. He did my surgery. He did both my surgeries. One was an emergency surgery. And again, it's a long story. That'll be a whole episode of its own. But literally, if my mom hadn't seen that job posting and hadn't applied me to it, and if I hadn't gone to the interview or given it a chance or taken the job, then I wouldn't have found out about this doctor, and who knows if the results of my surgery would have been as good as they were, because this cyst was like wrapped around my main artery in my neck. Like, who knows? God is good. But I was back on a roll again. I was in a full-time job, and this job was another level up from the marketing job that I was working, because number one, it was higher pay. Number two, it was 5 minutes from my house, not an hour and 15 minutes from my house. But number three, it was a whole school system, so there was more of a structure. There's an HR department, there's an IT department, and I was in a union and protected under like the union and got different benefits and time off. Like, oh my God, getting paid for holidays was something that I wasn't even used to. Like, it was crazy to me that I would get a day off and get paid for that day. Like, it just crazy. Or sick time, because especially when you work in a restaurant, like, there's none of that. Like, if you take a day off or you're sick, you're just not getting paid that day. And this job was also full-time, 40 hours a week. So I just continued to grow as a person, as a professional, as a student. I was going to school at UF full-time still. I was working full-time, like, just a lot. I was growing. And I actually also forgot to mention that during that time that I was working at restaurants, I got a part-time job at University of Florida, but this was a remote job, and I was called a UF online student ambassador. And so basically what I did was I promoted the online school, and we would do all of the social media posts, and we would make fun little like TikToks or reels about like what it's like to be an online student for UF and what we like about it, and just sharing our experiences. And that job I absolutely loved. So much so that I ended up keeping it even when I started working as an IT technician. So at this point, I had just turned 19. I was working as an IT technician full-time. I was working part-time as a UF Online ambassador. I was going to UF full-time for my bachelor's degree. And I was dealing with this life-threatening cyst in my neck that needed to come out, and I was petrified of having the surgery done. Like, just the thought of them cutting into my neck, sorry, that's like worst fear coming to life. So I grew, almost like how a rock under pressure or something becomes a diamond. I feel like I've heard that before, don't quote me on that. This was all it was a lot in the moment. It was a lot of change. It was a lot, but it just I kept leveling up, kind of, mentally, emotionally, career-wise. And I worked as an IT technician for about a year, when at that point, the school that I was working for was hiring for an SIS coordinator. Now, that is short for Student Information Systems Coordinator, and long story short, they manage all of the state and federal reporting for the schools. So like collecting all the numbers and sending it off to the state so that we, get funding and we're in compliance with the state and the federal government's, rules. And also managing the student information system. So like the application that all of the students' information is in, the teachers' information is in, the grade books, all of it. Like managing that, updating it, fixing any bugs when there are bugs, all of that. Now, when this job first was posted, I had been a tech for 1 year, and I avoided this job posting like the plague. Like, I knew it was within our department. It was within the IT department. I knew that they were looking for someone for it. I avoided it for like a solid month. I just literally like a wall in front of it, because I was like, absolutely not. I have gone through so much this past year. I am so tapped out. I am just starting to get a grip on my job and balancing it with school and all these things. Like, absolutely not. I'm not even going for that job. Like, I knew that deep down inside, like, I wanted to, but I was like, no, Dana. And then my mom texts me like a month after the job had been posted. She texts me a link to the job posting that she saw on like Indeed or something. And she said, look, this job is where you work. Have you seen this? She was like, it looks like a great job for you. And I remember I texted her back immediately and I was like, yeah, I've known about that. I'm not applying to it. And then I remember when I got home that night, she was like, why, like, what's the deal with that job? Like, why wouldn't you apply for it? And I just lashed out. Like, I think I was just, the whole thing scared me and stressed me out. And so I was just like, I can't do it. Like, I can't do that. I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just a technician. I don't know how to do data and things like that. I don't know anything about that. They wouldn't even want me. They wouldn't want to hire me. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, and I remember my parents sat me down and they were like, we know you're having imposter syndrome right now, but you need to look at the facts. This is like almost double your current salary. It's a huge growth opportunity. Everything in this world today is data driven. You would learn so much through this, and it doesn't hurt to just put an application out there. If they don't pick you, they don't pick you, and that's not your fault. You should at least go for it. At least try. And I kind of refused. I refused for a few days, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And then I remember hearing around somehow, like through the school system, that the salary that was posted with the job position wasn't really, like, there could potentially be room for growth. Like, and this could have just been a rumor. Like, I think I just like overheard someone saying this, but I thought about it more and I weighed the pros and cons, and long story short, I went for it and I got it. I got the job. And here we go, another pivotal moment in my life. I learned so much through just accepting the job. First of all, I negotiated my salary higher than what was posted, and I negotiated it higher so that, because at this point I didn't even have my bachelor's degree yet. I was still, going to school. So I negotiated that I got a raise when I got my bachelor's degree as well. In addition to that, the position was not in the union, which was very strange to me because all the other positions in the IT department were in a union. So I advocated for the position to be in the union, and I got it in the union. So then I got the position unionized, and this was just another turning point. So I was 20 years old when I got this job. So this starts bringing me to my 20s. I promise that everything that I'm sharing right now is relevant because I feel like it's very important for you to have a clear picture into what 16 to 20 looked like for me, so that you can now better understand what 20 to where I am right now, almost 22, has looked like, and the struggles that I'm facing. So I got this job, I think it was March, and like I officially started working the job after a couple of interviews in March of 2024. And then that June, so a couple of months later, I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And this was sort of where things started to get weird because I was very, very stressed the first 6 months of working this job just because there was a lot to learn and a lot to learn quick and things that I had never done before. And everyone understood that. They hired me knowing that I would need training, and they took that chance on me because they had worked with me for a year and knew that I had what it takes, but I still had to learn it all. And I was finishing out my last semester of my bachelor's, which I was taking like 6 classes my last spring semester, and then I took like 4 classes in summer A, which was June, so it was literally 4 weeks, and that was just because I had to slow down a little bit due to my neck surgery, and a lot of stuff happened, and I still wanted to graduate on time, quote unquote. So I was so busy and just stressed, and there were so many moments where I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, but I pushed through. And then I graduated, and then over the summer, there was a little bit of a chance for me to like breathe, and then I realized that I didn't know what I was doing next. I was 20 years old. I just turned 20, and I realized that I had no plan for the future. I was working this awesome job. I was making, a great salary for my age. I was doing these things that you don't typically see a fresh 20-year-old doing. And it was all exciting, but it was also scary because I was kind of forging my own path and I didn't know what was next. Like, I knew I wanted to continue schooling, but I didn't know in what. I didn't want to just waste money on just continuing to go to school if I didn't have a clear picture of what I wanted to continue in. So, what should have been a very exciting moment of, I just graduated, oh my god, I have my bachelor's degree at 20 years old, like, I'm working a full-time job, like a really good job. I have an office with a window now, under a beautiful tree, like, you know what I mean? Instead of that, I just sort of like slipped into a depression again because I was like, I don't know what's next. So I won't bore you with the details. I mean, that was a very like turbulent time just because I became very pessimistic about it and I was just like waking up every day and in a grumpy mood and like, because I had no future goal. This whole time from when I was 16 years old and started college, I had that like, all right, I'm going to get the degree. I'm going to get the degree. All right, I'm going to work the jobs. All right, I'm going to get another degree. All right, and like I had this like future that I was like working towards, and then I just accomplished it all. And I didn't know what I was working towards again at that point. So, in order to do something, anything, I ended up enrolling in a professional certificate through MIT, which is Massachusetts Institute of Technology, very highly renowned school of technology. I got a professional certificate in data engineering from them, and this was like a hardcore certificate. So this was from October 2024 through May 2025. So it was almost a full, like as if I was still going to college. It was two full, like a fall and a spring semester. So this was almost like my off year, quote unquote. Like I wasn't going to college, but I was working really hard on the certificate and just learning all these new things. And it was stuff that I was actually really interested in, and it paired with, the job that I was working. Through that time, I also took some time to figure out what I want to do next. And I decided I want to go on for my master's and I wanted to pursue my MBA because I myself am not only really interested in business and just how businesses function and the entrepreneurial aspect, but also becoming a better leader and being able to move into a managerial role and different things like that. And, I've always been interested in getting my MBA, so it kind of just made sense as the next move. So I applied, and that was a whole process. Like applying to master's programs to graduate school is no easy feat. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of references you have to get together. There's like 1,000 essays you have to write. But I did all that over the winter of 2024, started receiving my decisions rolling in the spring. And, I have now made my decision on where I'm going. And, as of the recording of this episode, it's May 2025. And this fall, I will be going for my master's degree. I am still working that full-time job as an SIS coordinator. I love it. I'm still learning so much every day. Like I'm still learning something new, but it's at least slightly less overwhelming as it was when I first started. And that's kind of where I am. I'm 21. I'm turning 22 in the fall. And where this all wraps up into a neat little bow about our 20s is that I have been struggling a lot recently figuring out what I'm going to do financially about my master's degree. Through all this time that I've been working while getting my associate's and bachelor's degree, I was able to pay off most of it. I did have to take out a little loan for the bachelor's degree, but I almost have that paid off at this point, and I paid most of it up front of my own money. And that's an amazing, amazing feeling. Like to have my bachelor's and be almost debt free is an amazing feeling. And I really want to pursue that again for my master's. But where I started to feel the struggle was, in order to achieve that, master's classes are a lot more expensive per credit, and I'd have to go a bit slower with it, which means it would take me longer to get the degree, which I'm not too upset about that if that were to happen, because I'm also not in a rush, really not in a rush. However, the money, that I would have to save and be able to put towards this is a lot. And so where I started to just feel this crippling pressure from every aspect is like, what do I do? Like, obviously, going into something and being able to front the money from the job that I work is huge and amazing. And to be able to avoid a loan is amazing. And like, that is all really, really good. And if I have the opportunity to do that and if I can pull that off, I want to. But I'm not going to be able to save much else. So then that's what started really stressing me out. And I think that this is relatable for every 20-year-old, just trying to figure out what's next. Because the reality is that I know I have my whole life ahead of me, but being almost 22, I never even imagined being 22. You know what I mean? You picture those milestone birthdays like 16, 18, 20, 21. But like 22, I never even imagined, and I know it's still so young. I know that in my heart. But it feels older than I ever even considered. And it's like, all right, well, then next year I'll be 23, and then I'll be 24, and then I'll be 25, and then I'll be 26. You know what I mean? And I'm really trying to figure out what my goal is supposed to be for the future, because, you can probably tell by now that I'm very organized and like responsible. Like, I wouldn't have been able to be here today and like do the things that I did without having this very like logical head on my shoulders. And so what's happening in my mind is like, okay, if I just dump all my money into my master's degree right now, I'm gonna have nothing left. So that means that I have nothing to save on like a house or moving out of my parents' house or maybe like a new car down the road, and then like if I do buy a house, and when it comes to the point of buying a house, do I buy a house where I currently live, or do I buy a house somewhere else where I've always wanted to live, where I actually want to raise a family? And then it's like, I'm in a relationship. I've been with this person for almost 4 years now, and then that gets stressful. It's like, we are going to want to get married eventually, and if you want to have some sort of a wedding, then you have to have some sort of money. You know what I mean? So then, like, should you be saving a little bit for a wedding? And then as far as school goes, it's like, I feel like I really want to finish school before I have kids. Not that you can plan that necessarily, but to the best of my ability, I would like to finish school and I just say school because I'm just talking about like degrees. Like, I will be a lifelong learner. I love to learn. I love to read. I'm listening to podcasts all day, every day. Like, I love learning new things, but this like getting degrees thing, I would like off my shoulders before I have kids. And, I do plan on going past my master's. So that's why, I feel like if I was stopping on my master's, then it's like, okay, well, just go get your master's for a couple of years and start your life. You know what I mean? But no, I plan on going past that. That's kind of where I'm at. And I really don't have the answers. Obviously these are all things that I need to figure out myself. Like, I need to weigh the pros and cons, like specifically with the financial situation of my master's degree and what I'm going to do. Yeah, and it's like, I feel really called to start a business as well. I've always been an entrepreneur, always had that mindset about myself. It is like this calling that I can feel in my bones. And I know that sounds like corny and cringe, but there are some things that you feel inside you that are meant for you. And that's how I feel about starting a business and doing my own thing. But that also takes money. You know what I mean? And I know that like investing in yourself and in education is so, so important. And that will all ultimately like help. But it's just it's like so stressful. And I'm also the youngest that I'll ever be. We are all the youngest in this current moment than we will ever be again. You know what I mean? I'm like an hour older right now than I was when I started recording today. Then I think to myself, like, should I be having more fun? Should I be like relaxing a little bit more instead of just like go, go, go every second? And then I do feel like not trapped, but like I just told you with my whole like from 16 to now, I've been doing like very professional things, if that makes sense. And now I'm like in like a big, big girl job. Like I manage all of the data for an entire large public school district. Like it's not huge, but it's a big public school district. I'm constantly talking with like the head of the district, like superintendent, assistant superintendent, the director of HR, the director of IT, the director of maintenance, the director of nursing. Like these are my coworkers now. These are the people that I'm dealing with every day and helping and getting numbers from. And like I'm working a big girl job. I'm 21 years old. That's amazing. And I'm so excited about that and proud about that. But there is just a lot of pressure that I feel. And it doesn't, like, I know that my story is unique in a sense and that not everyone has experienced this. And, you know, we all have our own different stories. But I think the common thread is that there are so many decisions that have to be made in your 20s. And no matter what you do, you're making a decision. Whether you sit around and don't work a job or go to school or pursue a passion, like if you choose that, that's still a decision. Or if you do pursue something, that's a decision. Like there's so many decisions that have to be made. And I've heard this my whole life. Like I've heard this about my 20s. And I literally remember when I turned 20 years old, I meditated that morning. Like I made a point to meditate the morning of my birthday. And I was in such a good mood. And I meditated on expansion and my 20s being calm. And like you obviously can't control that, but just to my best ability. Like I don't want to go back on that and say that like I shouldn't have meditated on that, because I do still think that that's really beneficial and I do still feel very happy with where I'm at. I'm just feeling all of these like pressures from just this time period. Like no one's putting these pressures on me. I feel like I'm not even putting them on myself. It's just, well, maybe I am putting them on myself. I don't know, but I do not have the answers. I'm in the thick of it. And if you are too, just know that you're not crazy. You're not behind. And most importantly, you're not alone. It doesn't matter how different your story is from mine. It doesn't matter if you've never gone to college or never worked a job or whatever. If you're 20, if you're in your 20s, this is a universal experience and we're going through it together. And I'm excited. I'm very happy to have this podcast and a platform to be able to talk about it and just put this out there. Even if I don't have the answers, if I can just make someone feel less alone. So that's it for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please give this podcast a follow. I am on Instagram at The Lot of It Podcast, where you can stay up to date with new episodes and other fun little things. New episodes come out every other Wednesday and are available on pretty much any platform that you get your podcast from. And I cannot wait to talk to you next time. Have a beautiful rest of your week. Bye-bye.